I used to think identity was something fixed, like the name printed on my birth certificate or the reflection in my bathroom mirror. But at 18, everything about me felt blurry and unstable, as if someone had taken my sense of self and shaken it like a snow globe. I remember those early mornings staring at myself under the harsh bathroom light, trying to decide if the discomfort I felt in my skin was a warning sign, or just another symptom of being a confused teenage girl growing up in a world that seemed determined to tell me who I was supposed to be. I grew up hearing so many conflicting voices. Some said femininity was weakness. Others said it was power. Some said a woman had to be flawless, smooth, slim, polished. Others said true confidence came from rejecting all that. I absorbed all of it, every contradiction, until I couldn't tell which beliefs were mine and which were forced onto me. All I knew was that my body always felt wrong, like a dress that didn't quite fit. I hated the curve of my hips, the softness of my stomach, the way my chest never seemed symmetrical enough. I hated that I'd compare myself to every girl online and swear something was defective about me. At 18, the pressure reached a point where something inside me snapped. I'd read stories about people who felt out of place their whole lives, only to finally understand themselves when they realized they were transgender. The idea was powerful, comforting even. It gave shape to the vague unease that had followed me for years. Maybe I wasn't failing at being a woman. Maybe I wasn't supposed to be one at all. I remember the first time that thought felt real enough to say out loud. I whispered it into the darkness of my bedroom, heart pounding so hard I could feel it in my throat. I think I expected some sort of relief, like a valve releasing pressure. Instead, I just felt numb, as if speaking it made everything harder. Still, once the idea took root, it grew fast. Too fast. I joined online groups where people encouraged me to explore the identity, where every doubt I raised was dismissed as normal resistance. They said almost everyone hesitated at first. They said therapists who asked too many questions were gatekeepers. They said I should trust my feelings even if I couldn't explain them. And I listened because I was desperate for guidance. Desperate for certainty. My first appointment at the clinic felt surreal. I sat there on that paper-covered exam table, legs swinging nervously, expecting deep questions about my past, my mental health, my fears. But the evaluation lasted barely half an hour. The clinician nodded along as I spoke, barely taking notes, offering a comforting smile that somehow made me even more anxious. She told me many people just know, and that I seemed confident enough. I wasn't. I was terrified. But I nodded anyway because I wanted someone to tell me I was on the right path. When she approved hormone therapy that same day, something inside me twisted. Part of me was relieved. Another part whispered that this was happening too fast. That I wasn't ready. But I swallowed that thought, convincing myself doubt meant nothing. Everyone I talked to online said doubt was normal. They cheered when I told them the news, saying I was finally taking control of my life. I clung to that encouragement like a life raft. The first dose was small but symbolic. I remember holding the bottle in my hand, staring at the warning labels, wondering if I was about to ruin my life or save it. My hands shook as I twisted off the cap. I told myself it was excitement. It wasn't. Within weeks, changes began. Subtle at first, then more noticeable. My voice shifted. My muscles felt different. My face changed in ways I struggled to describe. Everyone around me said I looked happier, more confident. But that wasn't true. I'd learned how to act like I believed in my decision. I'd learned how to pretend the changes were exactly what I wanted. Inside, a small pit of unease kept growing. By the third month, the social changes began. New clothes, new name, new expectations. I told my parents. My mom cried in a way that made my stomach hurt. My dad tried to look supportive, but I could see the fear in his eyes. They said they loved me no matter what, but I could feel the distance forming. Like everyone else, they thought I'd found clarity. But I hadn't. Because even as my body shifted, the discomfort didn't go away. Just moved, changing shapes. I found myself grieving things I didn't expect. My childhood photos, my old clothes, the softness of my own skin. I missed things I never thought I would miss. And late at night, after the world went quiet, I would stare at myself in the mirror again, now changed, and whisper the same question. Who am I really? That question began to haunt me. It followed me everywhere. To school, to the clinic, into conversations where I pretended everything was fine. Every time I dismissed it, it came back stronger. And then one night, something happened that I still remember vividly, because it was the moment everything inside me cracked open. But that moment belongs to the next part of my story. The night everything cracked open wasn't dramatic from the outside. No shouting, no crisis, no sudden explosion of truth. It was quiet, almost painfully ordinary. I was alone in my room, the air heavy and still, the kind of silence that makes you hear your own heartbeat. I had just come back from another appointment at the clinic. Another rushed checkup. Another quick confirmation that everything was progressing well. Another moment where I nodded along, pretending I felt the same certainty they seemed so sure I had. I remember sitting on my bed, opening my phone, scrolling through old photos without knowing why. I wasn't looking for anything specific, but something pulled me toward the images of myself before the transition, before the hormones, before the pressure built into something I couldn't hold anymore. I stopped on a picture from my 17th birthday. Me in a pale yellow dress, smiling awkwardly, hair curled just enough to look fancy. I remember feeling insecure that day. Thinking my shoulders looked broad, my makeup uneven, my expression forced. But as I stared at it now, something inside me shifted. I missed that girl. I didn't expect that. I didn't even know how to process it. But there was a softness in her eyes I didn't recognize in myself anymore. A gentleness I had lost somewhere along the line. My breath caught in my throat as the realization hit me. I thought transitioning would strip away the insecurity, the confusion, the pressure I'd felt as a young woman. I thought it would take away the pain. But looking at that picture, all I felt was grief. Grief for the girl I used to be. The girl I never gave a chance to understand herself. My hands trembled. I closed my eyes, taking long, shaky breaths, trying to push away the wave of emotion rising in my chest. But the truth was already breaking through the cracks. For the first time, I allowed myself to question the thing I had been avoiding for months. What if I wasn't transgender? What if the discomfort I felt wasn't gender dysphoria at all? What if it was something else? Body image, pressure, expectation, comparison, fear. What if I had rushed into something irreversible without ever slowing down long enough to understand myself? That question clung to me, tightening around my ribs like a rope. The next day I tried to ignore it. I went to school, went through the motions. But it felt like the world had shifted. Every hallway mirror, every passing reflection in the windows, every comment from classmates felt heavier. Some people still treated me differently, not cruelly but cautiously. Like I was fragile. Like I was changing into someone unfamiliar even to myself. My friends meant well, but even their support sounded scripted sometimes, like they were afraid of saying the wrong thing. By lunchtime I couldn't pretend anymore. I went outside, sitting alone on the bleachers behind the gym, letting the cold metal press into my skin. I wanted to cry, but the tears refused to fall. Instead, my chest ached with the weight of something too big for words. My best friend Mia found me there. She always had a way of sensing when something was wrong. She sat beside me quietly, not pushing, not asking, just waiting. Eventually, I exhaled a breath I didn't realize I had been holding and said the words that terrified me the most. I don't know if I made the right choice. She turned toward me slowly, eyes softening with worry. What do you mean? I shook my head. I thought I knew who I was. I thought this would fix everything. But I don't feel like myself. Not the old me. Not the new me. I feel like I'm disappearing. She didn't rush to comfort me. She didn't dismiss my feelings. She simply listened. And that alone made my throat tighten. I told her about the insecurities I had carried for years, about the pressure to be perfect, about the online communities that made it sound like questioning was a sign of authenticity rather than a warning. I told her about the appointments that felt too easy, too quick, too unexamined. I told her about the fear I felt every time I saw a new change in the mirror. Not fear of becoming someone else, but fear of losing myself entirely. When I finished, Mia reached over and squeezed my hand. You don't have to have all the answers, she said gently. But you do deserve to feel like you're allowed to question things. You deserve space to figure yourself out. Her words were kind, but they didn't erase the tension in my chest. They didn't erase the fear. They didn't erase the sense that I had walked so far into one direction that turning back felt impossible. That night I searched online, but this time for stories about doubt, about regret, about people who rushed into transition without understanding their feelings fully. I expected to find community, reassurance, guidance. Instead, I found arguments, defensiveness, anger. People calling detransitioners liars or traitors. People saying regret was statistically impossible. People saying everyone who questioned themselves was simply scared, and that real clarity would arrive if you pushed through. I wanted that to be true. I wanted clarity. I wanted the doubt to be temporary. But deep down, I knew something was shifting that I couldn't ignore. Days passed with the same heavy feeling building inside me. I kept up the act on the outside, but my heart wasn't in it anymore. Each change in my body, the way my voice sounded in recordings, the shape of my muscles, the way strangers perceived me, felt like a reminder that I was walking a path that might not be mine. And the guilt of possibly going backward felt overwhelming, like I would disappoint everyone. My family, my friends, the doctors, the people online who encouraged me. But the person I feared disappointing the most was myself. The version of me who wanted so badly to feel whole. Everything reached a boiling point one evening when I looked in the mirror long enough to stop seeing a reflection and start seeing a stranger. My heart pounded. My breath hitched. And a truth surfaced, one I had been too afraid to say aloud. I wasn't becoming more myself. I was running away from myself. But before I could fully understand what that meant, something happened at my next clinic appointment that changed everything, and not in the way I expected. My next appointment at the clinic felt different from the moment I walked in. The waiting room was too warm, the fluorescent lights too bright, and every sound seemed amplified. The clicking of pens, the shuffle of feet, the distant hum of printers. I sat there with my hands clasped tightly in my lap, rehearsing what I wanted to say. I would tell the clinician that I wasn't sure anymore, that something felt wrong, that I needed time, space, clarity. I didn't know what response to expect, but I hoped, naively, that she would understand. When my name was called, my stomach twisted. I followed the clinician into her office, noticing again how quickly everything always moved here. She didn't ask about my day. She didn't ask how I was feeling mentally. She simply opened her laptop, typing something before even looking up at me. "So," she said, smiling in that soft, professional way. "How are the changes coming along?" My throat tightened. This was the moment I had been dreading. I'm not sure," I began. "I've been feeling a lot of doubt. Like maybe I rushed. I don't know if I'm making the right decision." She paused, fingers hovering above the keyboard. Her expression didn't change much, but her eyes flickered with something. Maybe surprise, maybe impatience. "Doubt is normal," she said quickly. "Everyone feels unsure at times, especially early in transition. It usually fades." "I don't think this is normal doubt," I whispered. "I feel like I'm losing myself. I feel like I didn't understand what I was getting into. I feel like maybe this was more about my insecurities than my gender." She nodded sympathetically, but it felt rehearsed. "It sounds like you're experiencing some internalized issues," she replied. "A lot of people mistake that for questioning their identity. Sometimes you just have to give the process more time, more changes, more irreversible decisions." I shook my head. "I think I need to slow down." The clinician's smile tightened. "I understand why that might feel like the answer," she said gently, "but pausing now could actually set you back emotionally and physically. Consistency is important. Besides, you've made a commitment to this path. You don't want to undermine your progress." Progress. That word felt like a knife. "What if it's not progress?" I asked. My voice cracked. "What if it's a mistake?" For a moment, silence fell between us. She exhaled softly and leaned back in her chair. "Mistakes happen when people act on impulse," she said. But everything you've told me before was consistent with gender dysphoria. You sounded certain. You were confident. You knew what you wanted. I winced. Because that wasn't true. I had sounded confident. I had acted certain. But inside I'd been confused, scared, overwhelmed, and desperate for answers that never came. She continued. Identity exploration is complex, and fear can cloud your judgment. Let's not jump to conclusions just because you're uncomfortable right now. Hormones can cause emotional fluctuation. It's perfectly normal. Something inside me felt small and frustrated. I wasn't being heard. My fear wasn't being understood. My doubt wasn't being taken seriously. I felt like I was being ushered forward on a conveyor belt I couldn't step off. I tried again. Can we pause treatment? Just temporarily. Until I understand myself better. She sighed almost imperceptibly. If I pause your prescription now, it might disrupt your transition unnecessarily, and you might regret it. Most people who pause end up restarting anyway. Let's just continue for now, and we'll reevaluate later. My heart dropped. I wasn't asking for validation. I was asking for permission to breathe. And even that felt denied. When I left the clinic, the air outside felt cold and sharp against my skin. My legs were shaking. I sat on the bus stop bench, gripping the edge of the seat so tightly my knuckles turned white. I felt trapped, not by my identity but by the expectations built around it. By the medical process that seemed too eager to move forward and too dismissive of any hesitation. By the world that told me I had to pick a side and never look back. I cried for the first time in months, quietly, head bowed, tears slipping onto my hands. Everything felt so heavy. I didn't know who I was supposed to be. All I knew was that I didn't want to take another step down a path that no longer felt like mine. The days that followed were some of the most confusing of my life. I tried to pretend nothing was wrong, but I was unraveling inside. Every time I looked in the mirror, I felt like I was staring at a version of myself built from expectations rather than truth. My voice sounded foreign. My body felt unfamiliar. My expressions were stiff and practiced. I didn't feel real. One night, unable to sleep, I sat on my bedroom floor with a notebook open in front of me. I wrote down every feeling, every fear, every moment that had pushed me toward transition and every moment that now pulled me away from it. I wrote until my wrist cramped and the page was wet with tears. I didn't realize I was crying. When I finished, one thought remained clearer than everything else. I didn't want to continue, but stopping felt like betrayal, of myself, of the people who supported me, of the clinicians who told me this was right. Still, I couldn't ignore the feeling that I had rushed into a life that didn't belong to me. Everything changed when I told my parents. I expected anger, disappointment, confusion. But what actually happened shook me in ways I'm still trying to understand, and it marked the beginning of a new chapter in my journey. Telling my parents felt like stepping toward the edge of a cliff, unsure whether I would fall or finally learn how to breathe. For days, I rehearsed the conversation in my head. How I would explain the doubt, the discomfort, the sinking feeling that I wasn't living in alignment with myself. I imagined their faces twisting in confusion, maybe even disappointment. They had tried so hard to support me when I came out, even though I could see the fear behind their eyes. And now I was preparing to tell them that maybe I had been wrong, that I didn't know who I was after all. I chose a quiet evening, when the house was still and the world outside felt soft. They were sitting at the dining table, my mom with a cup of tea, my dad reading something on his tablet. I stood in the doorway for a long moment before my voice caught their attention. "Can we talk?" My mom looked up immediately. My dad set his tablet down. Their eyes were warm, patient. Somehow that made it harder. I sat down across from them, hands trembling in my lap. "I've been thinking a lot," I began, my voice barely above a whisper. "About everything. About the transition. About who I am." They didn't interrupt. They didn't even shift. They just listened. "I don't think I understood myself when I made the decision," I said. "I thought I was doing the right thing. I thought it would make everything clearer. But instead I feel lost. More lost than before. And I don't think I want to continue. The silence that followed was suffocating. I waited for the disappointment, the fear, the confusion. But instead, my mom's eyes filled with tears, not the sharp, painful ones she'd cried when I first told her about transitioning. These were soft, sad, and full of something I didn't expect: relief. She reached across the table and took my hands gently. "I've been afraid you were hurting," she whispered. "I didn't know how to ask. I didn't want you to feel judged. But I could see something wasn't right. I just didn't know if you'd be ready to talk about it." My dad nodded slowly, his expression gentle. "We love you," he said. "No matter where you're going or what you're figuring out. We just want you to be safe. And honest with yourself." Hearing those words felt like a weight lifting off my chest. I hadn't realized how much I needed their acceptance. Not of a label, not of an identity, but of my confusion, my humanity, my uncertainty. I cried then, letting out all the emotions I had been carrying alone for months. My parents held me, and for the first time in a long time I felt grounded. But acceptance didn't erase the difficult reality of what came next. Detransitioning wasn't simple. It wasn't just stopping hormones and returning to my old life. It was confronting the medical decisions I had made, the changes that had already happened, the impact on my relationships, and the fear of judgment from both sides of a conversation I never wanted to be part of. The next week, with my parents' support, I scheduled an appointment to discuss stopping treatment. But this time I went to a different clinic, one a friend recommended, known for being more thorough and cautious. Part of me dreaded the conversation. Part of me hoped they would understand. When I sat down with the new clinician, I felt exposed. My hands shook. I explained everything. The rushed evaluation, the pressure, the fear, the uncomfortable changes, the doubt that had grown into something undeniable. She listened. Truly listened. No interruptions, no assumptions, no reassurances that felt like shortcuts. When I finished, she leaned forward slightly, her voice calm. "It sounds like you've been carrying a lot of confusion and fear on your own," she said. "And it also sounds like your understanding of yourself is evolving. That's not failure. That's growth." I swallowed hard, emotions rising again. I don't want to hurt anyone. I don't want to be seen as confused or unreliable. I want to feel like myself again. She nodded. Identity is not a straight line. It's not uncommon for people to explore their feelings, make decisions, and later realize they need a different path. What matters is that you're being honest with yourself now. Then she said something that hit me deeper than anything else. "You deserved more time before starting treatment. More evaluation. More support. I'm sorry you didn't receive that." Her acknowledgement broke something inside me and healed something too. It was the first time a medical professional had told me what I already knew. That the process had been too fast. That my fears weren't imaginary. That I wasn't being dramatic. That I hadn't failed. She walked me through the steps of safely stopping hormone treatment. We discussed therapy, not as a form of correction, but as a place to explore the complicated layers of identity, pressure, self-image, and expectation. She emphasized that detransitioning wasn't about undoing a mistake, but about moving toward a deeper, truer understanding of who I was. Leaving that clinic felt different. The world outside was still the same. The cars, the buildings, the sky. But I felt something I hadn't felt in a long time. Oh, real, fragile, trembling hope. But detransitioning wasn't a clean path. And the hardest part wasn't the medical process. It was facing the world again. Facing the people who had rooted for me, the ones who believed in my transition, the ones who thought I had finally found myself. The reactions were unpredictable. Some supportive, some confused, some hurt, and some cruel in ways I couldn't have prepared for. And facing those reactions became the next chapter of my journey. The first person I told outside my family was Mia. I was nervous, even though she had always been the one who understood me the most. We met at our usual place, the quiet bench near the old oak tree behind school. It was chilly that afternoon, the wind carrying the kind of softness that made everything feel more fragile. When she saw me walking toward her, her expression shifted immediately. concern, curiosity, something else I couldn't name. She stood up before I even sat down. "What happened?" she asked softly. I took a breath that felt like it scraped against my ribs. "I'm stopping," I said. "The hormones, the transition, all of it." The wind seemed to pause. Mia blinked, her brows pulling together. "Is that what you really want?" I nodded, even as fear bubbled in my chest. "It's what I need," I whispered. I felt wrong for months. I kept trying to push through it because I thought that's what I was supposed to do. But it never felt right. It never felt like me. Mia exhaled slowly, her shoulders softening. "I was worried," she admitted. "I didn't want to say it and make you feel unsupported, but I could see you were hurting." I blinked back sudden tears. "I didn't want to disappoint anyone." "You're not," she said immediately. "You're just figuring yourself out. That's not disappointing. That's brave." Her words wrapped around me like warmth. For a moment, I thought maybe it wouldn't be as hard as I feared. But I was wrong. The next person I told was someone from the community I had joined during my early transition months. An online friend named Kai. We had talked about everything. Dysphoria, social transition, navigating family reactions. They had encouraged me when I doubted myself, celebrated when I made progress, and told me things would get easier. So when I typed the message, my fingers trembled. "I don't think this path is right for me. I'm detransitioning." The reply was almost instant. "You're confused. This happens when you let people get in your head. Don't throw everything away over temporary doubt." I tried to explain. They didn't want to hear it. Regret isn't real. You just need to stay consistent. You'll ruin your life if you go back. Their words felt sharp, cutting. I stared at my screen as the messages kept coming. Accusations, disappointment, frustration disguised as concern. But underneath it all was a truth I couldn't ignore. They cared more about the idea of transition than about me as a person. I left the chat, blocked the notifications, and cried alone on my bed, feeling like I had torn a piece of myself away. The reactions from school were mixed. Some people avoided me, unsure of what to say. Some whispered behind my back, not even trying to hide it. Others approached me with forced smiles, asking questions that felt invasive even when they were meant kindly. But the hardest moment came a week after I'd stopped hormones. I was walking down the hallway when a boy from my class, someone who had been neutral before, neither supportive nor unkind, stepped in front of me. He looked me up and down, confusion twisting his expression. "So, what are you now?" he asked, voice too loud. The question hit me like a punch. Not because it was cruel, but because it echoed the fear in my own head. I opened my mouth to answer, but nothing came out. I didn't know. I didn't have a label, a neat explanation, a confident declaration. I just felt human, messy, unsteady, real. Mia appeared out of nowhere, stepping between us. "She's figuring herself out," she said firmly. "And you don't get to demand answers." The boy backed off, muttering something under his breath. But the damage was done. My hands were shaking. My throat was tight. Mia looped her arm through mine and guided me outside. "You don't owe anyone clarity before you have it," she whispered. I wanted to believe her. But doubt still clung to me like a shadow. The next few months were a blur of therapy sessions, journals filled with messy handwriting, mornings where my reflection scared me, and nights where I questioned everything. Detransitioning wasn't just stopping something, it was rebuilding, relearning, healing parts of myself I had abandoned. Physically, the changes were slow. My body felt like it was unwinding from a direction it had been pushed into. My voice softened a little. My face shifted in small ways. But emotionally, the process was much more complex. There were days when I felt lighter, more myself, more grounded. And there were days when I felt lost, ashamed, afraid of the future. But through it all, one truth grew clearer. My identity wasn't something to rush. It wasn't something to force. It wasn't a mold to fit into or a script to follow. It was something to understand gently, patiently, honestly. And slowly, as weeks turned into months, I found myself moving toward something that felt peaceful. Not perfect, not fully formed, but real. One evening, near the end of my first year detransitioned, something happened that marked a turning point I didn't expect. Something that showed me just how far I had come, and how far I still had to go.